Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second edition of the Himal Fiction Fest. This year, we're celebrating South Asian fiction in translation. Last year, we had our first edition of the Himal Fiction Fest, where we mostly focused on Anglophone fiction from all around South Asia. And this time, we're focusing on literature that's been translated into English from 6 different languages: Bangla, Farsi, Hindi, Punjabi, Nepali, and Tamil. It's really exciting because South Asia has such a rich literary tradition and such a wealth of fiction that really deserves a lot more exposure and recognition. And translators are very vital for making sure that all of this work that we have in our subcontinent gets out into the public. And it's been really exciting organizing this fiction fest just personally as well, because I've come in contact with so many interesting people who've been translating so much literature that I would not have any access to. And it's so important that there are awards that basically give the translators the recognition that they deserve. So thank you to Jason, Daisy, and everybody else in the Armory team who's been working behind the scenes on making this happen. So we'll be having readings this session for this launch event. We'll be having readings from our translators, our 6 different translators, as well as the Armory shortlisted translators as well, after which we will have a panel discussion on the future of South Asian fiction in translation. And we're also very lucky to have a very special panel with brilliant translators who are at the top of their game, as well as Kanish Gupta, who is one of South Asia's leading literary agents. So thank you all for being here. I also want to let everybody know that this meeting will be recorded. So if anybody wants to have their video off, you can turn it off. And now I'd like to hand over to Roman. Roman, would you like our editor to say a few welcoming words?
Thank you, Neha. We've got such an amazing line of people and readings. I will keep this very short so I can get out of the way and let the main event proceed. I just want to say, first and foremost, a big thank you to Neha as well. I think Neha is already doing all the thank yous to Armory and to our panelists, and all of that is deep thanks from my heart as well. But I do want to take a moment to recognize all the work that Neha has put into this. Neha came to Himal. I mean, she's handling audience engagement, social media for us, but she came to us by way of publishing, and I think that goes to show just in how she's handled this entire festival and brought it together. Neha, thank you so much for all the work. It's wonderful to have so many familiar faces, so many familiar names, some faces that I'm seeing for the first time after reading your work and editing some of you. So it's a huge, huge pleasure. Thank you also to the Himal team behind the scenes, making all of this happen, guys. As always, yeah, it's such a pleasure to work with all of you. And I'm just so happy we get to do this because translation, I think, my personal take on where South Asian fiction is right now is that a lot of the most exciting stuff that's coming out is in translation. We're discovering things about each other and about each other's writing and languages that we never had access to otherwise. And I think the rest of the world is also paying attention through the Armory Prize, the Booker Prize. I mean, the list of prizes where people are starting to sit up and pay attention just goes on. And it's wonderful for the world to be able to look at us as a region through this lens and to start to understand a little bit more beyond the stereotypes and beyond all the stuff all the baggage basically that history has passed on. I do want to say just that, we are here in English, we're reading in English, we're speaking in English. We should never forget the worst that English could do because it did do a lot of terrible things as well. But for today, I think that we can appreciate and celebrate the best that English can do. And the best that it can do is to take people like us who speak so many different languages, come from so many different places. It can, I'm from Nepal. I would never be able to read or understand anything of Tamil, even though I would love to speak the language, but I get to read translation and see at least a glimpse of it. And I think that the value of that is immense. So yeah, I think it's time to celebrate the many wonderful translators who bring us to all these wonderful different worlds. So I will just hand it back to Neha, leave you in her care, and yeah, I'm going to sit back and enjoy all the readings. I can't wait to hear all of the translators presenting their work.
Thank you, Roman. Yes, so we'll start with the readings. For anyone who doesn't know yet, we will, over the next 2 weeks, we'll be publishing 6 different stories. So on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, you can stay tuned on the Himal website and all of our social media for the stories as they will get published. So we will start with Mahmoud Rahman and Shabnam Nadia. So Mahmoud Rahman's book, Killing the Water Stories, was published in 2010 by Penguin Books, includes stories of migrants and dislocated people in Bengal, Boston, Detroit, Providence. And his second book, a translation of the Bangladeshi writer Mahmudul Haq's partition novel Black Ice, was published in 2012, HarperCollins, India. His fiction and nonfiction and translators have appeared in various magazines and anthologies, including, very luckily for us, Himal Southasian. And this is a joint translation with Shabnam Nadia. Nadia is a Bangladeshi writer and translator and a graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop and a 2020 PEN/HIME translation, and also the recipient of the 2020 PEN/HIME Translation Fund Grant. Her translation of Mashruil Alam's The Meat Market, a short story Milk, won the 2019 Himal Southasian Short Story Prize. So we're also very lucky to already have Nadia's story published at Himal, and we're very excited that we have another translation that was published again this morning. So if you haven't read it yet, you can find it on our website today. So I will let the two of you take it from here.
Thank you. I mean, this is exciting to be part of the second Himal Fiction Fest. I think I missed it last year because of the time issue. So Nadia and I have talked about collaborating on a translation for many years. And now we get a chance to translate this novel by Mahmudul Haq, Jibon Amar Bon, My Sister Life, which we have both loved for many years. So just a few words, so I'll let Nadia read more of her excerpt than the intro note. Mahmudul Haq was born just outside Kolkata, and as a child, he migrated to Dhaka right after partition. He began writing in his teens and was most prolific in the 1970s. And he became quite well known as a literary novelist, a prose stylist. But in 1981, he stopped writing and turned his back on the literary world. He became a recluse. In recent years, in the last 12, 15 years, there's been a revival of interest in his work. I was living in Dhaka in 2006 when I read an interview with him in a local paper, and he sounded so fascinating that I searched out all of his novels and a story collection, and I began to translate his writing back then. I tentatively approached him, and he let me into his life. In what unfortunately would turn out to be the last year of his life, I visited him every 2 weeks, and he would not let me go without spending 5 or 6 hours with him each time. The novel Jibon Amar Bon, written right after the war, is set entirely in March 1971, when there was a massive non-cooperation movement with the Pakistan government that predated the onset of the Liberation War. And the main character, Khoka, takes a very strikingly unsentimental attitude towards this political upheaval. It is more striking when you realize this book was written in 1972, the year after the war. Nadia will read a short excerpt from chapter 2, and where Khoka is waiting outside his house, mulling over where to go.
The nation, the welfare of the nation, the future of the nation, patriotism, none of that penetrated his brain. It was far better to drown oneself in sluggish idleness than to waste oneself without reason in such quagmires. For sure, It was safer that way. Letting the air out from rickshaw tires, setting buses aflame, tossing brickbats at policemen, even though there were countless intense and fascinating ways of displaying one's ardent affection for the nation, Koka could never arrive at any sure decision. His hands and feet stayed shackled. During the 1965 war, even thieves, pickpockets, and conmen had sat idle and broke, their hands and feet tucked in, showing off the dizzying heights of their patriotism. What a time it was when no one picked anyone's pockets and burglary and crime came to a total stop. Was political crisis anything new? When were people easily able to shed wickedness and devilry? Humans, in other words, Satan's worthy opponents, would never treat you as a kitty and feed you a rasgulla made from pure curds. If they wanted you to swallow, you'd have to be on your guard from the outset. A vast sense of desolation surfaced inside Koka, strewn with the decrepit graves of wrinkle-skinned moralists. Perhaps it wasn't that. Maybe he just found comfort in being a contrarian, a self-absorbed habit whose mystery he would never uncover. Koka understood well that, unlike half a dozen others, it was simply not possible for him to drift behind a flock of sheep. What did tannery workers understand about politics? Every one of them merely a guinea pig. Even half-pant-wearing schoolboys with pinchable cheeks, kids who wiped their snot on their elbows and still had piss running down their legs, were standing on street corners spouting wisdom. These fresh-faced boys of Foyjuddin Bapari Primary School, as if they had any notion of far-off places like America or China, as if they had any clue about who was sitting in the dark, moving chess pieces like the supreme being. By the time they comprehended that the big fish who traded in religion and politics were more contemptible than dealers of adulterated medicine or vendors of rotten fish, their lifetime in revolutionary student politics would have come to an end. And if they did not jump into civil service exams then, there would be no further chances for absolution. Many of the big-name progressive or leftist personalities, more cautious than the blind who tap to seek their way, were now sitting in greedy stealth at the Intercontinental Hotel, saluting distant Scotland for the greatness of her Cutty Sark or Ballantynes. Dialectical materialism, capital, profit, class struggle, reality, the ups and downs of democracy, neo-Hodge, ultra-Podge, all this predictably twisted itself into place. And women's silk undergarments were peeled off just as easily as onion skins. When the night deepened or when the day became mistaken for the deeper province of nighttime, being left-wing was the be-all and end-all of everything. Sparring over Eisenstein's films, pawing through a hash of Pablo Neruda's poetry, or scrabbling about Picasso's murals, none of it sank roots any longer in quite the same way. Everything felt morbid, muddy, moldy, and instead, weightless dreams blossomed about Vanessa Redgrave, taking over everything. Amid news about the hackneyed factional infighting within organizations, the shape of Elsa Martinelli's legs emerging through a hole in a thick wall acted like a gust of wind and rain. The heft of Sophia Loren's breasts, like a miraculous whip of lightning, taught the ringmaster how to wag the tail right on the tip of his nose. Indeed, if such breasts came to a boy's destructive hands like a red rubber balloon, the revolution could be packed and stored away in a warehouse for 60 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Shabnam. Thank you, Mahmood. That was very powerfully written. I'm really excited for the book to come out, and I hope the translation is completed soon. I would love to see my sister life on the shelves. Thank you again for the reading. Now we'll move on to Kalyan Raman. Kalyan Raman is a translator of contemporary Tamil fiction and poetry, and over the last 25 years, he has published translations of 14 works of Tamil fiction. His translation of Perumal Murugan's Punachi was shortlisted for the inaugural JCB Prize, longlisted for the National Book Award for Translated Literature in 2020, and in 2017, he received the prestigious Padumai Pithan Award for his contribution to the cause of Tamil literature through his translations. So we're very excited to have you here, Kalyan, and I'm excited for your reading.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this Fiction Fest. It's my first time. First, I would like to say a few words about the author of the story that I'm going to read. His name is Mailan G. Chinnappan, and he's a doctor. He was born in a village in Tanjavur district of Tamil Nadu. He's about 38 years old. He's a prolific writer in Tamil with a focus on narrative fiction. His journey through the realms of medicine and literature has shaped a unique body of work that intertwines the precision of surgical procedures with the artistry of storytelling. Mylan made his remarkable debut, literary debut in 2020 with Prabhakaran in Postmortem, a medical thriller that delves into the intricacies of the human psyche. Since then, he's published 3 collections of short stories, and he's also won an award for one of the collections. He lives and works as a neurosurgeon in Tiruchirappalli, a major urban center in Tamil Nadu. Okay. So now I will read from the story. It is called Unknown. It's one of Mylan's iconic stories. In Tamil, you don't get too many stories set in hospitals, and the 2 hospitals of the present. And Mylan's contribution in this thing is quite immense. And this story is about a person, a beggar who is picked up, who gets injured in a hit-and-run accident, and then he is brought to the hospital badly wounded. And the entire system, its instinct is to abandon him, except for this one doctor, young doctor who's 26 years old, who kind of resists it, and he's trying to figure out, what is the impulse behind, what he's doing, bucking the system, and what is the value of life, really, even the life of an unknown. That is a question posed by the story. So I'll read a brief passage from the beginning of the story. It happened one night in the last week of March this year, when there had been a sudden downpour. At around 2, an attendant from a 108 ambulance van turned up, wheeling on a stretcher into the emergency section. Blood-soaked shirt in tatters, dirt-brown matted hair that hung down in a long curly strands, a horrible stink that rose from an amalgam of vomit, blood, filth, and dust. The nurse on duty asked the ambulance attendant as she passed the stretcher, "Unknown, eh?" "Yes, sister." "How on earth do you find these specimens in this pouring rain?" He said, "No." So the nurse says, "Make an AR entry and then take the stretcher straight to the zero delay ward and dump him there." "Let's shift him to the casualty van, sister." "Where can I find a person now to lift him to the van and bring him down?" "Impossible. Leave him in the ward yourself." Stretcher attendants at the hospital slipped away discreetly from the scene. In the zero delay ward, Kishore was the lone doctor on duty. As soon as the stretcher entered the ward, it made relatives of other patients screw up their faces. Kishore put on a second mask. "Unknown, eh?" "Yes, sir. Accident. He's a beggar at the entrance of the Mariamman temple, they say. While dashing across in the rain, he was hit by a speeding vehicle." "Is he conscious?" "He was raving throughout the ambulance trip, sir. Now he has lost consciousness." "Right. You can shift him to a bed." The patient was laid on the bed at the end of the ward. Vomit came gushing out of his mouth in spurts and flowed down the sides. Vomit had entered and choked his windpipe, with each raspy breath sounding like the announcement of an emergency. They could let him die simply by not doing anything for 10 minutes. Kishore couldn't approach him immediately to provide emergency treatment. The man was steeped in filth and gave off a horrible stench. Kishore rolled up his sleeves and pulled on a pair of gloves. Then he turned the man's chin to the left and held it there, preventing further streams of vomit from entering the windpipe. A nurse and an MNA came to his assistance. A tube from the suction machine was inserted down his throat, and the vomit collected there was drawn out. Kishore observed the man's breathing for about 30 seconds. "Sister, prepare him for intubation," he said. that 2 minutes?
Yes. Thank you, Kalyan.
Thank you.
For everybody for whom 2 minutes wasn't enough, Kalyan's story will be out at himalmag.com very soon. So stay tuned for that as well. Thank you, Kalyan. That was very well read. And I had a lot of fun reading it, even though there were lots of parts that were very horrifying. But it was very well written. Thank you. We'll be moving on to Sandesh Khemire from Nepal. Sandesh is a writer and translator based in Kathmandu. He has an MFA in creative writing from the University of Minnesota and is currently working on his book. He teaches writing at the Institute of Advanced Communication, Education, and Research in Kathmandu. Sandesh, I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, thank you, Neha. Thank you, everybody. It's so great to share the space with so many writers and translators that I look up to. I will begin by talking about the writer first. I'm going to share a short bio she sent me. Durga Karki is a lawyer by training, journalist by interest, and a writer by passion. She writes both fiction and nonfiction in various national dailies and online portals on issues ranging from feminism to federalism. Her first book, Kumari Prasnaharu, was published in 2020. I first read Chowmin, the short story that I translated in 2019, and I've been wanting to translate that story ever since. And I reached out to Durga in 2019 to translate the story. I failed multiple times, but we became friends. Then we started dating, and now we are married. And I finally mustered up the courage to translate the short story. This story is about a teenage narrator whose father has abandoned the family, and the narrator, Kamala, projects she's constantly yearning and searching for a father figure in her life. And the section that I'm going to read from is with her relationship with her school's principal. And it begins with a field trip. At the Maya Devi temple in Lumbini, I pushed through the crowd to ask for a photo with him on a friend's phone. He shaded his eyes with a hand over his brows and, like always, rested his other hand on my right shoulder. I saved enough of the money my mother had given for the trip to print 2 large photographs. I kept one above the door next to my father's photo. I wrapped another photograph in a newspaper and gave it to him. He smiled and said, "Wasn't there any in which I hadn't covered my face?" "There were, but none of just the 2 of us," I said to myself. Although I usually ranked 3rd or 4th in class, I came first in the mock board exams. A rumor spread the day after the results. The headmaster shows Kamala the question paper. There's something not quite right between them. I felt a sharp barb stab through my heart. I ran to the toilet in search for a place to cry. A graffiti on the toilet wall proclaimed, "Headmaster for plus Kamala." An emergency meeting was held at school immediately. The headmaster and other teachers entered our classroom. All of us stood up, but the headmaster didn't tell anyone to sit down. I continued to sob with my eyes lowered to the floor. Suddenly, the headmaster said sternly, "Kamala, step forward." I came out of the bench and stood crestfallen in front of everyone. "Did you cheat to come first?" he screamed at me. I shook my head, drew my snot in. "Why are you so downcast then? Stand tall." That day, I became truly scared of the headmaster for the first time. "Those of you who spread this rumor, should I read your names from the list in my pocket, or will you come forward on your own and apologize to Kamala? Who wants to be rusticated a month before the SLC exams?" The entire class fell into a pin drop silence. All other students hung their heads. I alone held my head high. "Must I call you by your names?" the headmaster thundered at the girl standing at the corner of the first bench. She had already started to cry. As soon as the headmaster spoke, she cried and said to me, "Forgive me, Kamala. I will never repeat that again. Please don't expel me, sir. Forgive me." 1 or 2 other girls apologized. As he was leaving, he turned around to say, "Kamala is my daughter. Believe me, you all are too. There is no one here who does not know about her. Aren't you ashamed to say such things? Rascals." If that nonsense isn't erased within the next half hour, I will be a worse nightmare. I spent a last pair of tears for that day and listened to his heavy footfalls recede. I wanted to run. I wanted to run to him, hug him, and shout, "Father." Thank you.
Thank you, Sandesh. Thank you, Sandesh. Charmin is a great story, and I can't wait for everybody else to read it. I promise I did not select the story just to have a little domestic affair, be a part of our fiction fest, but I'm really excited to have your translation be published on Himal. Thanks, Sandesh. And I hope Durga is around to listen to you read her work. So now we'll be moving on to Vaibhav. So Vaibhav actually got this whole translation fest started for us. I received his translation of this short story a year ago, and that's when Roman and I got the idea that we should have a fiction fest just for South Asian translation. So thank you, Vaibhav. Vaibhav is a translator and poet from India. He was mentored by International Booker Prize winning translator Daisy Rockwell. Daisy is here with us right now. Under the 2023 NCW Emerging Translators Mentorship Program. He was shortlisted for the Armory Square Prize for Southasian Literature, also present with us here today. So I'm glad this can be a cute collaborative affair. So thanks, Vaibhav. Vaibhav is currently also working on a translation of Anil Yadav's short story, Courtesans Don't Read Newspapers, also forthcoming from Penguin India. So you can take it from here, Vaibhav.
Hi, am I audible properly?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you to Himal and Roman and to you, Neha, for this lovely lineup of translators and putting me in there with such themed name. If some of you can't tell, I'm in a hotel room right now, and everybody's walking on tiptoes around me. I'm somewhere in Dalhousie. So I'm going to read a very short passage from the short story titled Lord Almighty Grant us Fire. The story talks about a Muslim weavers' colony in the city of Banaras, which gets flooded every year. This time around, though, something different is afoot. The water is talking back to the bereaved boys of the Mominpura cricket club. Born in Kanpur, Anil Yadav is a journalist turned author who is well known for his editorial essays and best-selling travelogues in Hindi. His writing is a testament to his journalistic integrity and skill as a writer of fact. I'm currently working on a short story collection titled Courtesans Don't Read Newspapers, out sometime early next year from Penguin India. And I'll read a very short passage from the story, from the very beginning of the story. The sun shone harsh and bright that day, and a scalding steam rose from the water. 6 small new coffins lay in a row atop a heap of garbage in the middle of the sludge. Beyond them, all the way to the edge of Mominpura, a lake of sewage, abuzz with mosquitoes, crashed in vain. The bloated bodies of several cats and a donkey floated in it. A boat flopped in the water opposite the drifting debris and water hazards. The phrase, "will come in riot," was clumsily scrawled in white paint on one side of the boat. A small flag, woven of shimmering gold thread, fluttered at the tip of the boat. The stench was unbearable. Everyone had covered their faces with kafiyas and gamchas, except for the children. Behind the men stood the women, bursting into intermittent bouts of sobs and hiccups, their kurtas and burqas hitched up to their knees. Occasionally, a faint tremor of wailing rose from the group, only to be whisked away by the wind. All of them awaited the boat that would take them to the graveyard on the other side of the slum. But the boat with the fluttering flag seemed to mock them, as if to say that it would only cross when there were riots. Otherwise, it couldn't be sure if there really were dead bodies in the coffin, or something else. Thank you.
Thank you, Vaibhav. I'm really looking forward to the book coming out, and I hope you're enjoying your trek.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So now we'll be moving on to Laila. Laila Gazel Azimi is a freelance writer based in Delhi who writes of food memories and the complexities of exile. When she's not crafting prose, she volunteers at the Community Library Project in Delhi. Laila translates English books into her native language, Dari. Laila, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, thank you, Neha. Though I'm very excited, nervous and excited both because I am a man of these beautiful and strong writers and translators, and it's my first time. Thank you, Taran and Neha, for giving this opportunity. So basically, when I heard about this Himal Fiction Fest, so I thought that mostly when you hear about Afghanistan, so mostly everyone minds come a lady who wear a burqa or chadri, and a man who has turban again on his hand. So basically, I want to show or tell people that in Afghanistan, there was lives, emotions, loves, feeling that people live normally without all these things that media shows or you read through the books. So today, the story that I choose is it's Yakro Starpath or One Day Forever, which is written by Lina Rosbe Haidari. She's a writer, poet, and journalist, and her poetry book was published in 2015. It's called Heaven Promises. And apart from that, she writes many novels, which today I'm going to read a very short part of it, which I translate. Girls who have no father, no brother, or any man to protect them from individuals like Haji Karim may find themselves vulnerable, akin to being led to the slaughterhouse like helpless sheep. Since my childhood, my mother instilled in us the values of honor and respect, cushioning us against actions that might compromise these virtues. Now, with this family announcement of my engagement and Haji Karim separating the news to everyone, the question arises, should I break off this engagement to comply with your wish for the remainder of my life? I looked at him in surprise and said, Mariam, which people? Did these people bring the Medal of Honor for me, you, or my mother? Do they thank you for living in poverty, hardship, and end this war with the honor and dignity? Has Haji Karim ever visited us without a purpose or assist us? Don't worry about people and their chatter. People gossip regardless, and their talk is not important. What matters is you and your happiness. Sabur and I will work things up, pack all their gifts, take them to Hamid's house tomorrow, and give them back. That will be the end of it all. I reached out to grab the box that Hamid had brought, but Mariam intercepted, taking my hand with an expression full of anger. She said, you're fortunate to have a man like Sabur in your life, but most girls aren't as lucky as you. Men like Sabur are like finding a needle in a haystack, rare and scarce. I have endured enough in my life, and now I don't want this label added to my name alongside orphan and thief, someone who ended their engagement. Hamid mentioned that if I break things off, no one will believe that I was unhappy with this engagement. In the eyes of the people, there won't be any apparent reason for this satisfaction. Hamid is young, wealthy, from a well-known family, while I'm a poor, orphan, and ordinary girl. People, even women, can be extremely harsh and injustice, often blaming the woman for every situation. They will undoubtedly assert that Hamid perceived some deficiency or flaw in me and ended the things. They will never consider that I was unhappy, and so I let him go. Thanks.
Thank you, Laila. It's really great to have your translation be published, will soon be published in Himal, and I hope to really see a book of yours that's been translated out in the wild and in my bookshelf as soon as possible. Thank you. So before I move on to Haider's story, I also want to let everybody know that Himal is an independent news organization. We're a magazine, and we would really like to be publishing more fiction and more translated fiction, and a lot of represent a lot of and basically be a space for a lot of voices and writers who would not have the space elsewhere. So if you haven't already, you should become a patron of Himal and support us. So now I'll move on to Haider Shabaz's translation. I feel it's a privilege to be a keeper of his words. Haider Shabaz is a translator of the Mirza Athar Baig's Hassan's State of Affairs, which came out with HarperCollins India, and the editor of a special volume against the canon Urdu feminist writing for Words Without Borders. He is currently a PhD student in the Department of Comparative Literature at UCLA. I'm going to be reading an excerpt of South Asian Canadian writer Fauzia Rafiq's story Kiru, which has been translated to Insect. This is a Punjabi story. In Pakistan, Fauzia worked as a journalist and screenwriter, and now she is currently in Canada. So this translated excerpt is from a novella, and its protagonist is a queer Dalit man from Pakistan who is accused of blasphemy and finds refuge in Canada. The contemporary novella challenges the patriarchal, casteist, and religio-nationalist narratives deeply entrenched in Punjabi and Pakistani literature. I will begin now. Everyone has some fears, some worries, some problems that keep them up at night. I have two that have never left me. I spent my childhood, my teenage years, and now I'm spending my youth under the weight of these two worries. One is my mother, and the other is my name. I could never understand either. I was still quite young when I first heard the meaning of my name. Irfan's cousins were visiting. All the children, me, Irfan Sahib, his cousins, gathered in the schoolyard after dinner to play police and thieves. Some children became policemen, some became judges, and some became thieves. I'm a policeman, I declared. You? Irfan Sahib burst out laughing. His cousins followed his lead like they did everything else and started laughing as well. I know how to shoot a pistol. I put my right knee on the ground, made a pistol out of my left hand and held it in my right hand, raised my elbows and started firing. Ta, ta, ta. Stop, Irfan scolded. I stopped shooting and looked at him. You can't be a policeman. Why? How are you going to be a policeman, motherfucker, when your name is Kiru? So what? I didn't understand what he was trying to say. You don't know what Kiru means? It means you're a lowly insect, a bug, a pest. He slapped my head and I fell back. So what can I be? I cried. I started crying. You, he drifted off. Look, he's a girl, crying like a little girl. A boy kicked me in the stomach. He's a girl, let's kidnap her. They picked me up and started carrying me around the courtyard. The kids who became policemen tried to snatch me away from the others. They grabbed me, clawed at me, kicked me. I fell on the concrete floor many times. I was terrified and started screaming. This spurred them on even more. I felt like my heart would explode from fear. Some adults finally arrived on the scene. Irfan Sahib told his cousins to stop and took them inside the house. They all kicked me while I lay on the ground before they left. At that moment, I heard the screams of another child. It was Irfan Sahib's younger sister, Dolly Baby. Nobody had paid any attention to my loud screams, but everybody around me, roused at the first sounds of Dolly Baby's cries, all the adults appeared instantly. The nanny arrived in a matter of seconds, picked up Dolly Baby in her arms, and started rocking her. The cook and the clerk arrived at the scene, abandoning their work, and then returned when they were satisfied that the baby was fine. I remained lying on the floor. I cried even more. Where was my baby? My body shook and trembled. I felt the injustice deeply. Someone picked me up. It was the school's new security guard, an Afghan refugee with a real, genuine gun. Irfan Sahib and everyone else feared him. He pulled me up and made me stand on my feet. He made me walk a few steps. Then he picked me up and brought me to the door of my inner courtyard. I went up to my baby, tears still running down my face. She was sitting in front of the tap outside the kitchen. Baby, I clung to her back. What happened, my life? It's okay. Have some patience. Can't you see that I have a porcelain plate in my hand? She jerked her shoulders and I fell on my back. She had a pile of dirty dishes in front of her. She didn't even turn around to look at me, just continued watching. I lay there powerless and crying. Once she was finished washing all the dishes, Stacking them up in the basket and securing the basket with a cloth, she turned and picked me up from the floor. Come, she hugged me, my beautiful baby. My breath finally returned to me. She took off my shirt, pushed me under the tap, and turned it on. The cold water stung my body, but also soothed me. She wrapped me in her shawl and carried me home. When we were inside, she searched for each scrape and bruise on my body, cleaned it with mustard oil, dressed me in a clean shirt, put me on the bed, and lied down next to me. Sleep, my life. She poked the bump on my forehead. For the first time in my life, I asked her the question that I'm still asking. Bebe, why did you name me Kiru? Thank you. That was Haider Shahbaz's translation of Kiru. So that, which will also be translated and published at himalmag.com very soon. We can now move on to the second section of the second section of this event. Thank you to all of the translators who read all of their readings so beautifully. And I'm really excited to see all of the work that will be published soon. Jason, I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Neha, and thank you for everybody for coming today. First off, I just want to thank Himal Southasian and the Fiction Fest 2024 for providing us with this really wonderful opportunity to have the Armory Square Prize ceremony live this year, and in particular to Roman and Neha and the rest of the Himal team. First, I'd like to just say a few words about the Armory Square Prize for Southasian Literature and Translation. The prize is sponsored by Armory Square Ventures, and it was created to inspire new directions for translators into English from one of the world's most diverse, historically and complex, and culturally vibrant regions. It awards a talented translator of Southasian literature into English with the publication of their outstanding manuscripts with open letter books based in Rochester, New York. Excerpts from all 5 shortlisted translators will be published in Words Without Borders, the home of international literature. The award is groundbreaking. It aims to help remedy the stark disparities in literary translation worldwide, while cultivating a new generation of literary translators working with South Asian languages and recognizing storytellers from the Indian subcontinent within the broader literary ecosystem. This, the second year of the prize, was open to translators of any book-length work of narrative prose, fiction, or nonfiction written by a South Asian woman author into a language other than English. I'd like to give a quick shout out to our amazing jury, which brought together award-winning specialists in South Asia and now non-South Asian literary translation from across the world, some of whom are with us today. It was an honor and a pleasure to work with Dina Chalabi, Shanaz Habib, Savad Hussain, Daisy Rockwell, Pia Sawhney, and Arunava Sinha. We were thrilled with the quality of the submissions we received and had to make some very hard choices. Right now, we'd like to ask our shortlisted translators to give a brief introduction of their projects and to read a short excerpt, after which I'll pass the mic over to Pia Sawhney, who will announce the winner. We'll go in alphabetical order according to source language. So I'd like to ask our first shortlisted readers, Shivangi and Tejasvi, translating from Angika, to please introduce their project and give a brief reading.
Hi, Jason. Thank you so much. A woman locks up her husband and mother-in-law in a room and runs away with her lover. This sounds more like a sensational newspaper headline than the synopsis of a novella. It is perhaps the grandest expression of love and yet the most widely trivialized. These headlines and the fascination with this phenomenon are a form of external voyeurism to the lives and the love of these runaway couples. Gulabia, told in Angika, maintains a careful closeness to its principal characters and their inner lives in a language that is theirs. Gulabia attempts to tell one tender story ripped from the headlines, and in the process uncovers the realities of a brutal caste and class system and the patriarchy. We are incredibly excited to be translating from Angika, an underrepresented and understudied language spoken in parts of Bihar. Shivangi will now read from a chapter from the novella in which Palesar, deep in the rosy preoccupations of new love, thinks about Gulabia after he decides that he will no longer labor on another soil.
Thank you, Tejasvi. Due to Singh's constant bullying, he felt less like a manager and more like a bonded laborer. He decided he wasn't going to be one anymore. As he made this decision, color returned to his cheeks. A weight was lifted from his head. For days now, he had been carrying a mountain around, and just like that, it was gone. Now his head felt light as a feather. The same house that was closing in on him for a week smelt of jasmines. No, it smelt of roses. And in this room that smelt of roses, he thought of a rose, of Gulabo. He spread his hands across the bed as if she was sitting right there. She made this bed. This is such a wonderful bed. He wasn't running his fingers on the sheets. He was tracing them across Gulabia's hands. The same hands with which she made this bed. Outside, the birds grew louder. Balesa wrapped the sheet around him. He didn't want it to get dirty. That was a huge possibility. All day, the wind comes from Kosi, carrying the sand and dirt and dumps it straight into the hut. In a few hours, this house was going to be Kosima's bed. He started to hum as he got up. Das Kabir jatanate odhi jyoke tyo dharidini chadariya. Kabir wore it with great care and put it back as it was. He wasn't going to let these sheets get dirty. Was his love even true if he did? He hung the sheet on the clothesline, but it didn't seem quite right there. Then he tried the hook on the wall where his shirt hung. He wore the shirt and hung the sheet. Then he left the house, the birds, and the... Thank you. That's 2 minutes, I think. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Shivangi. Thank you so much, Tejasvi. That was really wonderful. Thank you. We would like to move on to our second shortlisted reader, Aruni Kashyap, translating from Assamese. And after he reads, I'm going to hand things over to my colleague and fellow juror, Daisy Rockwell.
Hi, my name is Aruni Kashyap, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to read here. I'm reading from the book called 10 Love Stories and a Novella of Despair, which has been shortlisted by Assamese writer Anuradha Sharma Pujari. She is one of the most successful contemporary writers in the Assamese language. Pujari's critical and commercial success among Assamese language readers and literary critics rivals no one. This collection of stories and a novella, the book project that I have proposed, is curated from her wide range of short stories and novella collections written across 30 years. Curated under the theme of love, these stories explore love in all shades. They explore not only forbidden love across caste, religion, and borders, but also passionate, romantic, and filial love, love for self and love for the society, the pitfalls of love and loss that one feels if they don't have love in one's life. I'm going to read from the short story called No Man's Land. It is a short story set in a border town called Dauki in Northeast India. A mild excitement has arrived at this tiny place near the international border. For the past few weeks, people have repeatedly discussed an upcoming football match as they shopped for vegetables, eggs, rice, and mustard oil. It hasn't been long since I arrived here, not even a month. At first, when I reached this place, I felt as if I was in some foreign country. Insurmountable hills and sky-kissing peaks where clouds and cascades embrace to create blurry images, so different that what I'm used to seeing in Assam, that's Dauki, where I am after a long bus ride on serpentine roads. This is India's last town, near Bangladesh border in Meghalaya. I have been associated with an organization for 2 years, and I am here to conduct a demographic survey on their behalf. I wonder how this survey will benefit anybody, but I enjoy my work. But here I realize afresh, national boundaries cannot constrain human beings. Even though town, this place feels more like a wealthy village on its way to be a town. There's a church, a football field, a school, and shops and stalls on the roadside selling tea, rice, and many items. Made in Bangladesh, potato chips and packets of khan chanachur from Dhaka hang from the corner shops. Cheaper cakes and biscuits are available in the locality. Small bottles of fruit juice imported from Bangladesh quench the summer thirst of people here. I am looking for an electronic goods shop to fix my malfunctioning iron. I find a shop right beside the football field. As he works on fixing my iron, I observe the field with rapt attention. Local boys are playing football with great excitement. The electrician takes 10 minutes to fix the iron and tells me in Bengali, "Madam, there will be a big football match here, Bangladesh versus India. You're waiting eagerly for the game." I pay him, walk out of the streets, and decide to have some tea in one of the stalls near the roads. Mostly local Khasi, Jaintia people live here, but Bengalis, Biharis, Hindus, and Muslims also live here. Most of the Christians are converts from local tribes. Army convoys and coal-carrying trucks often move to and fro on the main road. Newcomers like me get a strange sense as though a war might break out soon. The anxious faces of the people seem to confirm this feeling, as if sinking into worries and fears. Thank you.
Hi, sorry, now I'm in charge because Jason had to go to a very important meeting. So thank you, Aruni. That was wonderful. I loved hearing it out loud. I've read it before, but I love to hear it for the first time. Our next reader is our third shortlisted reader is Shairi Devnath, translating from Bangla. So Shairi, can you bring up Shairi? Where is
Hi,
she?
I'm
I don't-
here.
Okay, good. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, hello everyone. So my project, I translate from both Hindi and Bangla, but for this I propose to translate from Bangla, a collection of short stories really written by a Bengali writer called Mohua Sen Mukhopadhyay. She's lived in Boston for nearly 30 years, and her stories are somewhere between sci-fi and imagined worlds, which is, I think, quite the rage now. And in her stories, she writes about, she writes about the possibilities of human experiences that we cannot or do not know due to our limited understanding of what intelligence might be. In fact, in her stories, human beings are creatures of limited means, especially in an age where our politics, emotions, and thoughts are increasingly being controlled by the digital tools and modern machines. I have in the story, there's the story that I will be reading. It's called The Well-Wisher, where this woman whose video has gone viral on Facebook, and people have sort of latched on to her, and they have opinions on it. So she talks about the freedom of women, of what independence might mean to women. And one of her statements is that a free woman is also someone who smokes weed and drinks vodka and parties. Even if she's married, it's fine. And there are people who have all sorts of opinions on it, and that's where the story builds from there. I think I'm going to start my reading now. 4 p.m. Wednesday evening. Nearly 5 days had passed since all those people saw the video and the footage went viral. Well, almost went viral. I didn't want to kill Mukul as vehemently as before. All that remained was a sharp, bitter aftertaste in my mouth. Scenes from a rapidly changing city flashed past the windows of the metro. I couldn't see much, though. Only people, countless people covered in grime, their clothes discolored. My confines of patience had finally crumbled after I got off at Tollygunge station last night. I remembered I had to tell Barun that he needed to bring what he needed to bring to the hospital. Dipping my hand absent-mindedly into my bag, I realized my cell phone was missing. 2, 3 times I rummaged frantically. It was a huge bag filled with important things, but also junk. For fuck's sake, why couldn't I get rid of things? The entire goddamned world was in it, except for my phone, which had suddenly vanished into thin air. Oh hell, in the middle of everything, now my phone was missing. I was exhausted by the mental stress of the last few days. I wanted to cry. I was completely alone in a station full of people. I was so tired I did not feel like looking for my phone or making a complaint. I walked out of there. The last few days had been very miserable, just the house and the hospital. The call came the night before last. Barun took it. My father's neighbor and longtime friend, Shonut Kaku, was on the other side. He was nervous because Baba had suddenly taken ill. From Newtown to Nagtala, the road seemed endless. Baba's breathing troubles had become very severe. After much running around, we admitted my father to a well-known hospital near the Eastern Bypass. Finally, thanks to the frenzy, there was a rip in the silence between Barun and me. He did not say a word about the video, did not react in any way at all. He had retreated into silence. At home, there was no other sound besides entering and leaving and giving instructions to the maid. One time I shouted at the top of my lungs, "Hypocrite, everyone's a hypocrite," and 1,000 other things. I asked Barun many times what I had done wrong. I liked to say whatever came to mind. Barun's broad-mindedness was the best thing about him. Then, when did he become just like everyone else? No cracks in this wall of stone. Barun would not speak about it. I knew this by now. This was how he would punish me. I sat on the balcony in the middle of the night. It was my favorite spot in our flat. The open sky in front of me. We lived in the last building of the apartment complex. Hence the vast expanse of nothingness. Only a structure resembling a dinosaur could be seen at a distance. It was unbelievable that I could take in a lungful of the open sky in a city like Calcutta. The balcony was my oasis after a hard day's work. The bamboo sofa set, the flower pots, the wind rushing in from the empty fields, Barun asleep in our bed, and a cigarette to smoke. This was my world. The incidents of the weekend came back to me as I sat on the balcony the other night. My mind was on a rewind. Siddhartha had got a brilliant break at the Times of India. Our entire group at Presidency University got together. We were thrilled to bits. There was weed, whiskey, vodka, wine, etc. at the party. All of us were a little out of control. Mukul was shooting away on a fancy phone he got from Singapore. He came up to me and asked me to talk about the weed-smoking modern independent woman. I was a sport. My friends knew all I needed was a little convincing to play along. Ladies and gentlemen, weed is an escape for working women like us. It's a taste of the sky, the responsibilities at home, managing a job. When all of this gets too much and you desperately need a breath of fresh air, weed can do it for you. Your mind is on a different plate. After this, Mukul started to ask me about my in-laws. What would they say if they got to know about it? I told him, does my mother-in-law not know whom she has brought into her family? If she has accepted an unholy woman like me, then what harm can a bit of vodka, cigarettes, and weed do? I blabbered a bit more along this line. No, I do not regret what I said. I did not imagine in my wildest dreams that Mukul would upload the video to Facebook. It went viral in a day. Hundreds of comments were posted. Some expressed surprise, while others made their disgust known. Many agreed with me. There were plenty of feminist takes. Then the commentators began to fight with each other, some subtle and veiled insults to venomous and aggressive comments. I encountered people of all sorts of mentality in these few days. My heart was ravaged by anger, irritation, insult, and bitterness. While drowning in the deluge, I realized Barun had not spoken a word. His being a mute spectator was so unusual that I did not know how to deal with it. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. So much, Shairi. That whole viral thing is so terrifying. And it was wonderful to hear you read.
Thank you.
Our fourth shortlisted reader is Aditya Vikram, translating from Hindi. Aditya, we need. Oh, here you
Hello.
are. Okay.
Hi. So, I shall begin. First, something about the book. Playful, irreverent, and searching, Miljul Mann is the tale of Gul and Mogra, two sisters growing up together in a newly independent India. one of the most admired writers in the Hindi language. Mridula Garg refuses to write womanhood as only marginalization. Moving through times of war, economic reform, unruly desires, and sullied marriages, the voice of this book clings to the world of these two sisters and the tenderness with which they hold on to each other. They laugh bitterly, even as all their freedoms are thrown into turmoil. Today, I'm going to be reading a small extract from somewhere halfway into the book. There's this paternal uncle, a character called Juggi Chacha, who's talking to these girls and as a patriarch, but will eventually soften and become one of the sisters, in fact. When we insisted that Pitaji buy us a cycle, he said, practice on a rented bike first. I'll buy you a new one when you're ready. It was obvious. We were to learn from Juggi Chacha. But he categorically refused to teach us. Girls riding bicycles are an open invitation to local loafers, he said. We were infuriated. Gul chided him. All my girlfriends ride bicycles, they're elders. Even the grumpiest of grandparents don't consider it a vice. You keep saying you aren't just our uncle, you're more like a brother, but you're worse than an old man. And what do they know about loafers? Huh? You must be a specialist when it comes to loafers. Juggi Chacha did not take the slightest offense. He just laughed. His laughter was like his high notes, loud and heavy, like the heroic voice of Babru Vahan, Mahabharata's mighty warrior. Then he repeated one of his silly catchphrases. Why worry, dear? I'm here. And what will you do? Just wait and watch. Watch we did. He bought a top-notch 350cc Norton motorcycle and ferried Gul and me around Delhi, one at a time. One time, he took both of us together. Chacha in the front, Gul in the back, wearing a baggy, billowing gharara. And there I was, woefully sandwiched between the two. I wore a skirt and blouse, which meant that I could be stuffed in the smallest of spaces. Gul's silky, delicately stitched gharara looked gorgeous on her. So much so that she was calling for herself. To look fashionable, one had to fan the gharara out to its full span when one sat down. Both Gul and I knew that she was Madhubala for the young men on the streets, and they were letting out deep, loving sighs when we passed by. Juggi Chacha had learned how to drive a bike only recently. That's why all his attention was on driving. Otherwise, 2 or 3 loafers would have been beaten soundly that day. But a different accident lay in store for us. One end of the billowing gharara got stuck in the rear wheel and began to pull away. Thankfully, there were many folds in the fabric. Chacha was new to driving, so he was going slowly, wasting all the features of his fancy motorcycle. Despite that, the gharara couldn't spin round for too long and finally tore apart. Gul was gripped by the wheel right up to the drawstrings and thrown on the ground like a severed kite. Juggi Chacha erupted. Didn't I tell you earlier? You don't even know how to sit on a motorcycle. How on earth will you ride a bicycle? Seeing Gul sprawled face down on the ground, I burst into tears. He scolded me. Stop crying. She's the one who has fallen down. Why are you crying? I began to cry even louder. Gul is dead. Gul is dead. Before Chacha could stoop down to help her, Gul got up herself and spoke. You're dead. This motorcycle is the devil's machine. It tore apart my new garage. Thank you.
That is also so horrifying. The idea of having your garara stuck in a motorcycle. Oh, thank you so much, Vidya. That was beautiful. And finally, we're on our last shortlisted reader. The 5th is Sana Chaudhary, translating from Urdu.
Thank you so much, Daisy. Am I audible? Can everybody hear me?
Yes. Can we bring Sana up? We have Pia here. Yeah, okay.
Hi. Thank you.
Hi.
I would first like to thank the Armory Square Prize team and Himal Southasian for giving me a platform to talk about this project today. It's an honor to be here in such great company. The novel that I'm translating is called Fortress of the Forgotten Ones by Urdu author and activist Fehmi Daryaz. It is a work of historical fiction that tells the story of Mazdak, who is believed to be the first socialist revolutionary in history. What makes this novel particularly important is that it is the story of a forgotten people who was silenced and erased from public memory in the 5th century. This book is profoundly relevant today when the world finds itself so consumed with the fate of activists, rebels, and political prisoners. I will now read a few lines from the novel, originally titled Kilae Faramoshi. That night, the courtyard in the messenger's Haveli was full of builders, miners, and craftsmen. They were sitting on the ground, by the pillars, upon the shriveled grass, and on the parapet by the pond. They were a lot more than 100 in number. As soon as anyone heard that Mazdak was issuing orders on how to bring about this great change the right way, excuse me, they instantly joined his band of followers. Thousands of builders, craftsmen, and farmers were weary of plundering. Looting wasn't their ancestral vocation. Rather, it was the livelihood of bandits who lived in hiding up in the black mountains of Bisutun and raided the caravans traveling on the grandiose highways of the kingdom. But they were under duress, great duress from hunger. They were also vexed by the realization that some of them had begun to take pleasure in the pillaging. Another important factor was that only those with physical prowess could get a share in the grain and property. Was there another way? They all wanted to know. In an engraved veranda of the Haveli, carpets were pulled out from the drawing room and laid underneath an archway. Mazdak sat in a squatting position on a carpet in the center. On his left sat the scribe with several inkpots and reams of paper. And people were surprised to see Mazdak's Jewish friend, Joshua, sitting on his right. Mazdak and Joshua were engrossed in a long conversation, speaking in whispers with their heads huddled. Among the crowd was Prince Kavus, leaning against the base of a column. Despite the builders' and craftsmen's insistence, he had opted not to sit on the carpet. He was barely 17 years old and an ardent advocate of Mazdak's, intoxicated by the idea of equality. Equality, which he had never experienced in the 17 years of his life. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sana. That was a wonderful reading. And thanks to all of our shortlisted readers. I'm going to turn it over now to Pia Soni, jury member and co-founder of Armory Square Ventures, to announce this year's winner. And shortlisters, if you don't want people to see your live reactions, you should turn off your camera. Yeah, because you might start swearing or whatever, or screaming or something like that. So yes, good. Turn off your cameras and over to you, Pia, for the big announcement.
Thank you, Daisy. Yes, please don't shoot yourselves here. We're really delighted to join you all, and it's been such a pleasure, really provocative and stimulating to hear snippets of the work that everyone's working on here. I guess it's this evening in Southasia for so many of you. And many thanks again, Daisy. Many thanks to Himal Southasian for co-hosting this announcement with us. It's really a joy and distinct pleasure to be here with you all. I know I share my colleagues' sentiments when I say that we really enjoyed reading all the submissions this year, and I'm very pleased to have a chance to announce this year's winner. Drum roll, Dr. Sana Chaudhry, translating from Urdu, wins for her English translation of Famida Riaz's novel, Fortress of the Forgotten Ones. Congratulations, Sana.
Oh my God, thank you so very much.
It's I'm glad
I can't believe it. Goodness. I was feeling so safe with my camera turned off. Thank you so very much, guys. I'm so thankful. My heart is so full right now. I have no words. This is huge and completely unbelievable. Thank you so much, all of you.
It was a beautiful work from an amazing competitive shortlist that we were all just so happy with everybody's work, and we can't wait for everybody's work to appear in Words Without Borders and yours in from Open Letter.
I'm so excited. Thank you so much.
All right, back to Neha at this point.
Congrats, Sana. That was a great reading, and I can't wait to read more. All the other translations were also excellent. That was such an amazing shortlist. So congrats to all of the Armory people. You guys got a great shortlist together. Thank you. So we can move on to the third section of our fest. So the third section is a panel discussion on the future of South Asian fiction in translation. So I'll soon be handing over the mic to my colleague Shweta. Shweta is a very talented colleague of mine. If you haven't been following Himal Southasian, you've probably seen a big uptick in all of our book reviews or book essays that we've been doing. Shweta is our books editor, and she is also responsible for the Southasia Review of Books newsletter, which is a monthly newsletter that goes out from Himal Southasian. If you haven't signed up already, you should sign up. We will be Shweta will be writing about all of the book reviews and book review essays that we will be publishing, and also her book recommendations, a monthly podcast with writers and authors from South Asia, as well as the latest news from the publishing world in South Asia. So if you haven't already, you should go to our website. I will put the link in the chat, and definitely sign up for the newsletter. So for the panel, we have Daisy Rockwell, Dr. Jayashree Kalathil, Musharraf Ali Faruqi, and Kanishk Gupta. I'm sure most of you here already know about our panelists, but Daisy Rockwell is a painter and award-winning translator of Hindu and Urdu literature. She has published numerous translations and was awarded the Aldo and Gian's Scaglione Prize for translation of a literary work in 2019. Her translation of Gitanjali Shree's Tomb of Sand won the 2022 International Booker Prize and the 2022 Warwick Prize for Women in Translation. We're very lucky to have you here, Daisy. We also have Dr. Jayashree Kalathil, who is a bilingual writer and award-winning translator of Malayalam literature. She's the author of the children's book, The Sackclothman, which has been translated into Malayalam, Telugu, and Hindi. Her translations have been awarded the Crossword Book Award for Indian Language Translation, the JCB Prize for Literature, and the V. Abdullah Memorial Translation Award, and a jury's commendation for the Muse India GSP Rao Translation Award. We also have Musharraf Ali Faruqi, who is the author and translator, translator, and publisher. He's the founding editor of the Library of Urdu Classics and the CEO of StoryKit, a storytelling program that teaches children how to tell and write stories. We also have Kanishk Gupta, who's a literary agent, writer, and publishing commentator. He's the founder of Writer's Side, the largest literary agency and consultancy in South Asia. Gupta has been credited with for single-handedly popularizing literary representation in the subcontinent, and represents a range of highly accomplished authors from around the region, including Daisy, who is here with us right now. So Shweta, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Neha, for those excellent introductions, and a very special thank you again to our panelists, Musharraf, Daisy, Jayashri, and Kanishka for joining us today. So South Asian fiction in translation is having its moment, but what do we want the future of translation to be? What has worked, and what are the things we need to do to go to the next level, and how do we guide it to that place? This is what we hope to explore in today's conversation. So translations have undoubtedly become more diverse in South Asia. We're seeing a greater number of works being published. Many talented translators, like those we've featured here today, are translating not only to English, but between various South Asian languages. Different communities have sprung up, blogs, databases, collectives, to support translators and fill the gaps. So while there's still a long, long way to go, the future of translated fiction certainly looks promising. To name a few milestones, we have the International Booker win in 2022 for Geetanjali, Shri, and Daisy, which was not only the first for Hindi, but the first for any South Asian language. And initiatives like the SWOT Project by the University of Chicago and the Armory Square Prize have all brought greater visibility for South Asian fiction in translation. So let's start with Kanishka. As the founder of Writers' Side, South Asia's largest literary agency representing a huge number of authors, perhaps you can speak on the future of publishing translations. What are the efforts being made across the industry, and what needs to be done to support future South Asian translators?
So I would say that in India there's a level playing field between translations and Indian writing in English. I would say that publishers would be more open to publishing a new novel in translation, or even a new short story in translation, as opposed to a new novel in English. I had the fortune of attending Frankfurt Book Fair right after Daisy's win, so I managed to get a lot of meetings. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult for me to get meetings at the Frankfurt Book Fair. So what the Booker win, and before that the success of Ghachar Ghochar and No Presents Please did, but Daisy and Gitanjali's Booker win took it to another level, is that editors were more willing to look at submissions. They were more willing to consider them. But I felt that at the end of the day, it's about how an editor responds to a text. The bigger thing that I have seen is that this ecosystem of and this camaraderie between new and upcoming translators, and Armory Prize, which is very important because it's the prize is publication in the UK US, which a lot of well-known established translators who've published many translations. In fact, you'll be surprised to know that JCP prize-winning translators have not been published in the UK US. And on the other hand, we'll have Sana, a very well-deserved winner, and before that, Mr. Farooqi getting published in the UK US. So this is important because it opens, new horizons. You become eligible for prizes. You get reviewed in publications, but it's very difficult to sell translations abroad. But I think things are looking up. I mean, things are looking better. Since Daisy's win, I've been able to sell only 4 or 5 translations in the UK US markets. Yeah. And I feel that grants, pen grants, and now this Armory Prize, they have a grant, for South Asian translations. I think even then, one has to pitch to publishers, because only UK US publishers can apply for these grants. And how do we get them to read a proposal? And because these grants come with deadlines. So and many of the champions or champions of translated literature, ones who are very interested in like platforming South Asian translation, the UK and US, unfortunately they are mom and pop enterprises. Some of them are growing, but they don't have the bandwidth. So just offering them some sort of an inducement is not going to change the fact that like 2-3 people are like running publishing houses. So I mean, one needs to find a way to crack the MNCs, like the Hachette's and the HarperCollins and the Penguins of the world in globally, to get them to like work very closely with the translators and like publishers in India. So things are looking up, and in India, I would say even I have more translated fiction on my list than Indian writing in English, because I don't feel anything that path-breaking is being done in IWE for the longest time. So
Thank you for that, Kanishka. And we'll move on next to Daisy. So great translations have the potential to elevate voices and ideas that have been left out of the mainstream across South Asia. So Daisy, I wanted to ask you about the future of translation as a framework for resistance and activism against various lines of exclusion. For example, the conscious effort you've made to focus on and translate women's voices in South Asia. So what are some positive changes you're seeing in terms of gender representation in the South Asian translation scene going forward?
Well, I think there has been a change, but sometimes we have to really make a concerted effort to think about these things, because it's hard, for example, to get permissions to translate work, especially if you're an emerging translator. It's like a really tricky, challenging process. And so to like laser focus on some kind of unrepresented voice, whether it's women's writing or Dalit writing or Muslims writing in Hindi or something like that, you have to really go through, every translator has to go through a long process of finding the right text and getting the permission, which, if the author has passed away, then you have to work with their heirs, and it's very confusing and difficult. So being an activist translator is a lot of work, and sometimes it's easier to take a path with less resistance. Like, I'll give you an example. After the Booker win, I started to get lots and lots and lots of authors or relatives of authors asking me to translate texts, and they were all men. All of them were men. And even though I'd given countless interviews about how I was only translating women, they didn't care. They thought they'd take their shot, right? So it just shows you how the process, the winnowing process works. Like, you have to push through this chorus of voices, of overrepresented, shall we say, voices, to find the voices that you're looking for, and it is just not at all easy. So I commend, for example, we decided last year with the ASV, we had a lot of applications, and there was like maybe 3 women authors out of, I don't know, I can't remember the numbers, but like 40 or something like that. So that's why we asked this year to have all the submissions be for women authors. And it was very interesting because the pool was much smaller, because people had to actually identify a project, identify an author, get the permission, create the sample. Like, a lot of the previous applications, these were things that people were already working on, so they already had all the materials. So we had maybe 20 entries, but they were all really good. Like, it was a very high quality pool, because people, there was more kind of purposefulness about seeking out projects. And so, like, we were all just like really excited about our short list. We were pleased with all of those things, and we were sure that all of those books will be published at least in India, but we hope, maybe they'll get some recognition outside of India as well. But they're all stunning works, and it's a diverse set of languages and topics and themes. So I think it takes a concerted effort to approach things from an activist point of view, and it's easier not to, because, as I said, all the men are out here waving their manuscripts around and trying to get translated. But it's not just men, it's upper caste or whatever. It's the people that already feel that they deserve to be translated, whereas sometimes I actually have to, seek women out and ask them would they like to be translated, and they'll be kind of feel like why would I want to translate them? So it's interesting because that I give all these interviews and I always say that I'm translating only women, but that message does not get out at all. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Daisy. And we'll now jump across to Jayashree. So, Jayashree, a topic you've engaged with quite a lot is on translating for Western versus domestic readership. In your excellent translations of S. Harish's Mustache and Sandhya Mary's Maria Just Maria from Malayalam to English, nothing is watered down, and you've preserved the unique cultural and linguistic elements of Kerala. So, can you tell us about resisting demands to explain certain words, italicize, use glossaries or footnotes? And do you see this refusal as a positive future trend in South Asian translations?
Thank you. I think there are 2 or 3 different levels at which I kind of engage with this. One is that one of the questions that people ask me is, who do you imagine as your reader when you're translating? And I always say that it is very difficult to imagine a reader, because I think I like to think of my reader as anyone who will read English. So we tend to think of English as an American or a UK language, British and American. That's what we tend to think of it as. But if you look at it, there are many different Englishes, many different English readers around the world. So when you translate, at least for me, all of these Englishes, and Oxford English Dictionary lists about 36 or 37 different Englishes. So in a way, we have all of these Englishes at our disposal. So it is not a question of, catering to a Western audience. You might be catering to many different audiences when you're translating. It is also a question of, as Daisy said, translation is for me an activist endeavor. It is also a linguistic activism in the sense that there is a certain process of decolonizing of the English language that is part of the work I do as a translator. So it is, in some ways, you are making your own claim to the language from whichever position that you're coming. So then this request or the demand really to italicize words as though we need readers to be told that suddenly some other language has kind of inserted itself into your text, as though the reader cannot understand it as they're reading. You don't need to do any of that. If you pay attention, I think, to the original and try and communicate what is in it, you do not need to gloss as a separate, glossary or italicize words. You can bring all of that into the language that you're using, which is English. And given there are so many different varieties of English at your disposal, you can work with it, you can dance with it, you can play tunes with it, so essentially you're playing around with 2 different languages. And I also think that a language becomes richer because it is being used in different ways. A language becomes more colorful, more, interesting because various different people are using it in different ways. So translation allows you to do that as well. And when you are translating something from Malayalam, there are many ways in which you can do that. From any language, actually, there are many ways in which you can do that. You can pick and choose depending on whether your character is a Dalit man at the turn of the century in rural agrarian Kerala, or a contemporary woman who speaks American English within the Malayalam text, like Maria in the book that you mentioned. So characters are so different. So the language that you use can also be all of that different without having to cater to any one audience or even our idea of what a Western audience is. I mean, it is very different when you think about sitting here in the UK. What people might think of UK as Western is very different from what people might think of the people in the US as Western. Cultures differ even there. So I like to explore the possibilities of what I can do with the English language in taking Malayalam across into English.
Thank you for that, Joshua. And now a question for Musharraf. So outside Pakistan and outside the subcontinent even, Urdu literature is deeply overlooked. Literary translations of works from lesser known and lesser used languages like Sindhi, Punjabi, and Pashto, to name just a few, are even more overlooked even within Pakistan. In such a space, you've made significant contributions in translating Urdu classics into English. Your rendition of the Indo-Persian epic, The Adventures of Amir Hamza, to name an example. So, could you tell us about the future of translating Urdu classics, poetry, and folk tales in particular? With the decline of South Asia's classical languages, in what ways do you think translations can help sustain these original works of literature?
Thank you. Thank you, Shweta. In my view, we do not know what we have done in the field of narrative with our classics. And I say this because we do not have any studies, any texts that tell us what our classical narrative, whether they're in Urdu or other languages, have achieved in narratology, to use a word. And I think knowing that is very important, because without knowing that, we do not know how we have arrived at writing stories the way we do. If we are at all in any way different from other cultures, or is there anything specific about South Asian or Urdu language that will be revealed through the study of classics and how they have affected the way we tell stories. Sometimes I find very interesting folk tales which say, okay, yes, this folk tale is about us because it looks at life in a particular way. I find it very curious that many Urdu language writers, contemporary writers, they're not keen to read the classics, or they do not, or classics do not come up in conversation when we do talk about it. So I think if you remove Shakespeare from English and say, let's just talk about English literature without Shakespeare, I'm just giving a maximum example, but this is what it is. If you remove certain fundamental texts, certain basic texts from a language, let's say, let's remove Chaucer from English and say how the English, let's discuss English literature in the absence of Chaucer, or let's discuss English literature in the absence of Milton or Shakespeare or others. So but we feel completely relaxed about discussing Urdu literature without any reference to the works of the past. And that I find very curious, very strange. So my aim, so basically I translate for fun, I like a story, I choose it. There are hundreds of classics, but I pick up a certain text because I really love it. And then I say, okay, I'm going to translate it. This could be a long text, could be a short text. And it gives me satisfaction that, okay, I enjoyed it, so maybe somebody else out there is also going to enjoy it. And I try, because of the nature of translation, reading it closely, or spending so much time with the text, I try to figure out what this text is trying to achieve, or what is it reflecting in the present time about the past, and what is it telling about us as a people. So these are the considerations that go into my translation, and there's no mission, there's no crusade. This is just my way of figuring it out, figuring out the past, our old narratives, and how they're constructed. I find that interesting as an exercise. How it's going to affect the course of things, whether in South Asia or outside South Asia, I don't know. But I do think that with these texts becoming available to other people who study classics and folklore and short classical texts, they might find something interesting. They might find a clue there, which connects one language to another, which connects one culture to another. And I think that is how it's going to grow. Maybe not immediately, maybe not in the present, maybe after 5 years, maybe after 10 years, I don't know. But like I used to sometimes tell Daisy that she's doing some fundamental work long before her Booker Prize win by translating so much text from important writers from Hindi into English, bringing it before a world audience, whether or not the book is selling in the UK or US market, irrespective of the fact. That is a very important labor to do. These are contemporary texts which relates to and translates. So I think we can find people like we hear news that young people, Gen Z, or even younger than those, they're picking up translation. That so hopefully some of them will also pick up classics and become curious about it. So and I think classical text is also a very interesting text in the sense that it is a safe text. The writer is long gone, and you can have any opinion about it, as opposed to a context where a lot of politics come into it. Okay, this person has this kind of politics, this writer, or they, is of a particular gender, or is looking at world from a particular point of view. Some of there is a consensus that many of the texts that were published were written by women under men's names. So I'm sure that it is also true of the classics. It is impossible that you'd have female poets who could rival Ghalib. Malaka Chandabai, if you read her poetry, it is at the same level almost. People are going to, start shouting that no, not Malaka Bai Chanda is not Ghalib, but I'm telling you that her poetry is as beautiful and as grand as some of Ghalib's poetry. So if you have people of that it's not gender specific, this is what I'm trying to say. And women have always contributed to literature. Yes, they have not been allowed to give out their names or, publish under their own names or, even, but I have a very firm belief that storytelling was a very fundamental part of South Asian way of life. And it's impossible that it being such a fundamental part, women were not participating in it in a very significant way. So we'll figure out hopefully in the future with more clues where things are, where they're headed, and if we find more readers for our texts. But I'm just doing it for my fun, for my own fun.
Thank you, Musharraf. And now a question that's open to all our panelists. So technology and AI has permeated several aspects of our lives, but how has it affected literary translation in South Asia? What happens when data and technology is used to determine what and who gets translated? And what are the promises and dangers that it represents for the future of translated fiction?
Yeah, I think one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that AI translation is very, very uneven. So it's partly because it depends on how many texts and what texts are being fed into the system. So South Asian languages that you must have noticed, like if you just do auto translate on social media or something like that, Southasian language translation is really bad still. And I don't really see it currently having that much impact on our field, even though people are talking about it constantly. But what will have an impact is that, and this is a trend worldwide, is where companies, and I wouldn't say this is so much a problem for literary translation, but for other kinds of translations, companies will generate a translation through AI and then send it to a translator to edit. And it's very, very hard to edit these texts because they are like, I think I read somewhere, they always look plausible. You know, they're made to look fluent, even though they could be absolutely full of errors, but they're very smooth. So it's actually a lot of work to go through. I've heard from people who have done it, a lot of work to go through and find the errors and fix it up. And it just would be so much easier if they just sent it to a translator, but everybody's so tempted by the idea that AI translation is this quick fix.
I think this is happening in the content writing space, where translators are now being asked to edit translations generated by AI, and they end up rewriting or retranslating those texts, but then they are not paid as much as they were when they were translating. And this is happening across content writing, editing space. But I haven't come across translators or even writers writing in English who are using AI. Yes, I mean, a lot of them are using AI for, official communication or, structuring feedback generated or, like created by like humans. But I don't think they're using AI. It's not working out. I haven't. But yeah, it's very good in structuring, feedback. If you have feedback on something, even if it's like a long note and you want to just structure it, and just organize it into like different sections. I think AI, in that sense, AI is good. And then you have to keep prompting and keep sometimes like sort of shouting at AI to just get their act together, because it doesn't happen at the first instance. So yeah, but I haven't come across translators using AI, like creative literary translators. I don't know about others.
I think if we can teach AI to take care of footnotes and indexing,
yeah,
that would be a great help.
At the London Book Fair this year, there was a lot of discussion on this, and the Society of Authors in the UK were doing a big study. The report has come out, and it is actually showing quite a bit of lost jobs for translators, illustrators, etc. Now, I don't know if it is exactly for literary translation or translation in general. There is also some discussion here within the anti-racism movement, and I always think of myself. I mean, I am a woman of color, migrant who lives in the UK and translates into English from an Indian language. So we do see it somehow connected in terms of our contribution to the field, because first of all, there is this is sort of connected to the very first question that you asked, Kanishka. There is an issue with diversity, beyond all the work that we do to kind of, all the efforts that we do to raise the profile of South Asian literature or raise the profile of translators, etc., there is still an issue of institutionalized racism within public publishing. And that affects translators who are people of color and not native English speakers. Already, you come across this attitude saying that you must translate into your native language. So there are publishers actively looking for English native speakers and writers who then translate from other languages into English, not the other way around as people like me do, who we translate from our native language to English. So we already face that. Then there is the question of what technology is going to do. in addition to that. So for many of us, we are looking at it as yet another level in which various barriers can become even thicker, even harder to cross. So yeah, there's
I think they don't even connect with the some of the themes and the, the history of the subcontinent. For instance, without naming names, I pitched a translation by a very well-known contemporary Bangladeshi writer to a publisher in the US, and he liked it, but he said that American readers don't know about Mujibur Rahman and his assassination. I was quite stumped. So I mean, they don't connect with some of the stories that the translated literature are trying to kind of share. So I mean, there is an issue, and then there is the issue of tokenism. That okay, we have one translation from South Asia and that's it. Then we'll commission for next year. They're already doing this. The one thing that we haven't addressed yet in India is that because of this whole wave of translated literature, a lot of mediocre and half-baked translations, and I'm talking about South Asian translations into English, are being like not just being published, but they are being celebrated. So that is some introspection that needs to be done at our end. That I mean, are these translations at par with like translations that are published abroad? And I'm only talking about the quality of the translation. I'm not talking about the story that is being told. So I think, and I sometimes feel that because of this, because it is like, and I mean, you're free to disagree with me, but I'm a publishing professional who represents authors across genres. Sometimes very good writings in English, they are kind of overlooked or neglected by juries. So I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Oh, I'm on mute.
You're on mute.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you for that all. And finally, to wrap up our conversation, could you each tell us about one or two of your favorite works of South Asian fiction in translation? Shall we start with maybe Kanish?
So I mean, I'm a big fan of Mustache, translated by Jayashree Kalathil. So I think that should have been published internationally long ago. So that's one book that really spoke to me.
Thank you.
I am a big fan of Muhammad Omar Maman's translations of both Manto and Nair Masood. He was a real master translator who I think taught us that you can make a translation sound amazing without, colonizing the language. And he doesn't, no italics and no footnotes and just pure readable text that's just beautifully done. So he's kind of my role model.
I have two books here. One is Aranyak by Vibhuti Bhushan Bandyopadhyay. I actually read this book in translation into Malayalam many, many years ago. And it's only very recently I have read the English. And I think there is 2 or 3 different versions in English, but I quite liked Vimli Bhattacharya's translation. And the other one is Father May Be an Elephant and Mother Only a Small Basket, but by Gogu Shyamala. So that there is 9 translators translating her many different stories. This is one of my all-time favorite.
Thank you.
I think The Mirror of Beauty by Shamsur Rahman Farooqi, written and translated by him. Kai Chanthe Sare Asma was the Urdu title and Mirror of Beauty was the English title. Has been overlooked as one of the greatest novels, contemporary novels, and should be talked about more. And it's one of my favorite novels.
Thank you all for those excellent recommendations. And I think that's also a great note to end on, bringing it all back to where this discussion started. So thank you to our wonderful panelists for a brilliant and engaging conversation and for being here with us today to kick off our Fiction Fest. And before we let you go, very quickly, a few words on Himal Southasian. What we do and what we love doing is really looking at South Asia like no other, and that gives us a very unique community and viewpoint and the privilege of speaking across lots of lines and making events like this possible. And what we do in terms of independent journalism and supporting South Asian literature as well is very hard to do. So to all of you who are here, I want to say please support Himal in any way that you can. If you'd like to help us out, please do become a Himal patron. We have a great patron program with lots of perks, and we'll welcome you to a fantastic Himal community. So thank you, and back to you, Neha.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Shweta, and thank you, Daisy. Thank you, Jashri. Thanks, Musharraf, and thanks, Kanishk. And thank you also for all of our translators and our readers, and also for all of the Armory people. I'm so glad that we could come together to do this fest together and also celebrate South Asian fiction in translation. I think translators are doing so much for fiction right now. I'm really glad that we can come together to make events like this happen. Thank you, Shweta, for moderating. And once again, I really hope that we can keep doing events like this. It's such a small knit community, the community of translators, South Asian translators specifically, and I really hope that we can keep working together, keep publishing together, and keep writing and translating together. Once again, if you would like to support our work and support what we do here at Himal, you can become a Himal patron. You will get a nice right side up map of South Asia in your email that you can put on your wall, like we all do at Himal. We're not a cult, but thank you, everyone. This is so great, and I'm so glad that we could make it happen.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ganesh. Thanks, Mishra. Thanks, Daisy.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.